Single dad janitor discovers a hidden truth that exposed a $10 billion merger. The CEO's next move was a. Tom stared at the papers spread across the CEO's sleek desk, the fluorescent lights flickering unsettlingly above him. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the pages of the merger report. The figures seemed unreal, mind-boggling, yet the implications were all too real. A $10 billion merger that promised prosperity but cloaked a dark underbelly of corruption. He shook his head, grappling with the weight of undisclosed truths that threatened the very institution where he worked. The laughter of students echoed in the halls outside, a stark reminder of what he yearned for his daughter Lily. A life where she could walk tall, free from the stigma of his janitorial role. As the mop glided across the shining floor, Tom's mind was anything but calm. Fear gnawed at him, a relentless hunger that left him breathless. The merger could spell disaster for the university, affecting countless lives. Would he be labeled a whistleblower or a pariah if he acted? What cost would his courage demand? He recalled Dr. Reynolds's eyes, shining with wisdom and conviction, the professor who had long believed he should aim higher. Integrity is a responsibility, the old man had said. The words hung in the air, a reminder that ethical choices could shatter his fragile world. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Tom's heart raced as he realized the contrast between the jubilant atmosphere surrounding the merger announcement and the chaos swirling within him. Rumors of dissent stirred among his colleagues, whispers brushing past him, sending chills down his spine. Could he stand before the CEO, a man revered for his ruthless ambition, armed only with the truth? What if the truth wasn't enough to save him from losing his job? He feared the judgment of his peers, and more importantly, the realization that his daughter might have to pay for his misplaced bravery. His mind spiraled, raking through every possibility and consequence. Would Lily ever understand why he chose to fight the corruption, even if it meant they face poverty together? If he kept quiet, would he be able to look her in the eye knowing he had let greed dictate their future? Guilt roasted his insides like fire. Each breath grew heavier as the emotional storm within him swelled, expanding into a vortex of determination and dread. The thoughts collided, shattering his fragile confidence. A colleague he trusted closely had slipped away into the shadows of complicity, feeding the beast of unethical ambition. Tom felt a deep betrayal, echoes of the past clawed at his resolve. With every frustration mounting in his chest, doubt turned to anguish. Could he soon find himself fighting against not just a system, but people he thought were allies? The stakes rose, and his grip on certainty waned. As he prepared for the confrontation that loomed ever closer, unease tightened around his thoughts. Tom felt the weight of the moment cresting, pressing down with an urgency he couldn't shake. If he exposed the corruption, would his life unravel completely? Would his dream for Lily dissolve into the chaos of fear and loss? The swirling thoughts threatened to consume him whole. Just as he thought he had grasped control, the reality spiraled away, leaving him clinging to one haunting question: could he find the strength to navigate the turmoil and protect his daughter while standing firm against the very foundation that supported his existence? Tom sat at the kitchen table that night, staring blankly at the remnants of dinner. The half-eaten slice of pizza sat untouched, cooling like his resolve. His daughter Lily played quietly with her toys in the adjacent room, blissfully unaware of the turmoil that raged within him. With each soft giggle she emitted, the question loomed larger: what kind of man was he if he couldn't provide her a safe future? The day's confrontation with the CEO gnawed at his instincts. He had rehearsed it 100 times in his mind, the moment when he would stand up and speak out against the merger. He envisioned the CEO, stylish and smug, dismissing his concerns with a wave of his hand. But the fear of being laughed at or, worse, belittled, clutched at his heart. Tom had spent years navigating the world of academia, cleaning the floors while dreaming of being part of something greater. Now here, at this pivotal moment, it felt as if that dream churned in the pit of his stomach, threatening to suffocate him. Outside the window, dark clouds marched across the sky, a weather report that mirrored his mood. But instead of letting despair engulf him, he made a decision. He would gather information, he wouldn't edge closer to the fight without preparation. Tom rushed to find his laptop, determined for clarity and purpose. In the dim glow of the screen, he began to research. The more he delved, the more revelations unfolded. He unearthed patterns of previous mergers that had gone awry, and of whistleblowers whose proclamations were met with swift retaliation but resulted in systemic changes. Each story resonated, he felt a sliver of strength entering his weary bones. What if he could turn his fear into expertise? Knowledge was power, and he had always believed in the value of education. As he pieced together the elements of the merger, financial records, projections, and corporate agreements, his confidence began to swell incrementally. Tom calculated risks, assessed the potential fallout, and plotted a course of action. The timeline grew clearer. He needed to confront the CEO, but with undeniable proof, armed with the truths he had extracted from public records. His heart raced not from fear, but from purpose. A flicker of defiance ignited in his chest. He could no longer remain the janitor who simply walked the halls, he needed to be the man who dared to challenge greed. He pictured Lily's future brighter, unshackled from the shadows of his silence. But a gnawing disturbance started to creep in. What if things didn't go as planned? The next day, under the fluorescent lights of the break room, Tom's connection with his colleagues shifted. He observed their reactions, noting who leaned toward complicity and who seemed genuinely concerned. He began forming connections, slowly collecting allies in his corner. Perhaps there lived others who felt the pulse of dissent beneath their polished exteriors. As he continued to navigate this new territory of confrontation, cutting through layers of deceit and complicity, each coffee break evolved into strategic discussions. Tom learned to elevate his voice and articulate his thoughts with clarity. No longer merely the janitor, he was growing into someone who could challenge structures once considered invulnerable. But with every step forward, shadows loomed. Dread pricked at him when he caught wind of the CEO's increasing paranoia. Whispers about an internal investigation circulated among scattered employees, and Tom realized that time was running thin. As he prepared for the conversation he had rehearsed countless times, he knew the stakes had risen higher than he anticipated. He was no longer merely protecting his job, he was preparing to stand up for integrity itself. The fragility of hope cut through him. Could he really confront this titan of ambition? The moment was imminent, and as he walked through corridors lined with academic accolades, a newfound purpose thrummed beneath his skin. The time had come to face the turbulence head-on, but the real question now was whether he had what it took to emerge unscathed. With a deep breath, he tightened his resolve. The confrontation awaited him, and although trepidation whispered hesitance in his ear, Tom clenched his fists. He would confront the CEO, not just for himself, but for Lily and her right to a future built on the foundations of truth. Tom's heart pounded as he approached the polished office door marked with the CEO's name. The polished brass felt cold and foreign under his fingertips, a harbinger of the uncertainty that lay ahead. He recalled the resources he had gathered, statistics, testimonies, and projections, all meticulously compiled to paint the portrait of a merger that was, at its core, a leviathan fed by greed. The weight of his discoveries pressed down on him like an iron anchor, yet for the first time, he felt a flicker of liberation coursing through him. He took a moment to gather his thoughts and practice the words that would confront not just the man behind the desk but the very system that perpetuated injustices. Each time he rehearsed his speech in the mirror, he noticed a subtle evolution in his voice, less tentative, more resolute. The man staring back at him was not the janitor who feared ridicule, instead, he was transforming into an advocate fueled by righteous indignation. The door swung open, revealing the CEO's impeccably decorated office, complete with a view that overlooked the cityscape. The walls, adorned with accolades reminders of a world where success was measured in sleek suits and firm handshakes, felt like a shrine of a life Tom had once longed for. Yet, today was different. Today, he wouldn't be just another invisible cog in a vast machine. "Tom," the CEO greeted, his tone smooth like silk. There was a casualness about him, the kind that emits power and disdain in equal measure. The confidence radiating from him threatened to swallow Tom whole. He took a deep breath and stepped into the room. "Thank you for seeing me, sir," Tom said, his voice steadying as he adopted a posture of determination. He could see the flicker of annoyance cross the CEO's face, a momentary crack in the facade of control. "What is it, Tom?" "I'm busy," the CEO replied, patting his papers as if to brush aside the subject of his motley janitor. Tom cleared his throat, summoning the energy boiling inside him. "I have concerns about the merger," he began, feeling the momentum of his careful research fortify his every word. "I've found discrepancies in the data that suggest this merger could lead to detrimental outcomes for our employees and the community." The CEO leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "And you think your little findings justify disturbing my operations? Look around, Tom. You clean these halls. You don't advise us on business matters." The dismissive tone struck a nerve, igniting something primal within Tom. Anger flared for a brief moment, but then he remembered Lily and the future he desperately wanted for her. He straightened his spine and pressed on, eyes fierce. "The implications of this merger go beyond profits. They impact lives. Real people depend on this institution. We cannot let greed overshadow our responsibility." As the confrontation unfolded, the CEO's expression morphed from amusement to disdain, a chilling reminder of the stakes he faced. The realization that he was swimming against a current of corporate apathy heightened Tom's resolve. He laid down every piece of evidence before him, revealing details that could unravel the tapestry of deception spun over the past months. The CEO listened grudgingly, his frown deepening as Tom elaborated on a critical flaw he discovered. "This merger will displace jobs without rehire provisions," Tom declared. "It threatens our employees' families and futures. You can't ignore that." Silence filled the room, growing serrated as Tom sensed the shift in power. Yet, his fear lingered, mixed with an intoxicating rush of self-realization. He was no longer simply the janitor, he was a voice of truth, bravely challenging the paradigm. "Consider this an opportunity," Tom pressed. "An opportunity to lead with integrity instead of reckless ambition." The CEO's face hardened. "You're walking a dangerous path, Tom. You have no idea who you're challenging," he warned, a faint tremor in his voice revealing a hint of trepidation. With that, Tom's heart raced wildly, yet hope flickered brighter than any trepidation. Perhaps he wasn't just risking his job, he was unveiling an eternal truth. "And you underestimate me," he replied, a fierce determination burning in his gaze. As he stepped away from the CEO's office, Tom felt as though he had leaped into a new reality, one poised for upheaval and evolution. Yet, lurking uncertainty nagged at his gut. Would he be strong enough to see this fight through? The road ahead teetered on a razor's edge, and as Tom moved back through the familiar halls, everything felt different. The walls held stories soaked in bravery and soon change. He was stepping into the unknown, he was prepared to face the repercussions of his actions. The confrontation had awakened something raw, something dangerous but also powerful. Tom realized he was standing upon the precipice of a battle that could alter his life, his job, and Lily's future indelibly. Now it was only a matter of time. Would the CEO retaliate? What consequences loomed for a man daring to speak the truth? The tension wrapped around him, firm and undeniable, as the next chapter of his fight began to unfold. Tom returned to his workstation with a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation simmering beneath the surface. The throbbing pulse of the confrontation still echoed in his mind, yet it wasn't just fear of retaliation that occupied his thoughts, an intoxicating sense of empowerment intertwined with his anxiety. He had taken a stand against the very architecture of greed that had shaped his life for so long, and for the first time, he felt like a player in the game rather than an unnoticed pawn. Back in the break room, the same worn chairs and flaking paint seemed to hold more weight now, as if they were witnesses to his transformation. Over a cup of bitter coffee, he allowed the significance of his actions to sink in. He had unearthed damning evidence about a merger that could upend lives, and he had the audacity to speak truth to power. But as waves of self-assuredness surged through him, the remnants of doubt began whispering in the corners of his mind. Would this moment unify him with his purpose or isolate him entirely? His resolve hardened moment by moment. The imminent confrontation with the CEO served as a catalyst for something more profound within Tom. He had started to draw strength from a burgeoning belief in his own capabilities. Yet, could he sustain it against an adversary who wielded power like a finely tuned instrument? Motivated by thoughts of Lily and their future, Tom concluded that the weapon of knowledge needed to be wielded meticulously. He pulled out his phone, determined to dig deeper into the murky waters of the proposed merger. As he sifted through corporate reports and press releases, a dawning realization began to form: there was a fundamental disconnect between the high-level narratives being shared by the company and the vagueness underlying the fine print. Each sentence he deciphered revealed not just flaws in the merger's justifications, but an intricate tapestry of deception, omissions and manipulations that could lift the veil on a narrative carefully orchestrated to quell dissent from whistleblowers like himself. This wasn't merely a business transaction, it was a calculated strike against the very fabric of the employees who had fueled the company's rise. The hours dissolved as he plunged into the labyrinth of information. He meticulously cross-referenced projections, scoured through employee testimonials, and laid bare unspoken truths. He realized he wasn't just gathering data, he was formulating a battle plan. His heart raced with every new piece of evidence he uncovered. A timeline emerged, highlighting how the merger had become a meticulously plotted scheme to bolster profits while minimizing service and support for the employees that made the foundation of the company. However, the most unsettling discovery was yet to come. As he pieced together the jigsaw of facts, Tom uncovered an obscure contractual clause that outlined potential legal loopholes that the executives seemed poised to exploit, a contractual hedge that could lead to criminal litigation. This knowledge was explosive. The raw power of his findings urged him forward, yet it also served as an ominous reminder: with greater knowledge came greater risk. He was acutely aware that this information, if used improperly, could unravel a delicate corporate tapestry and ensnare him in a web of consequences he was unequipped to handle. As Tom prepared his notes for the next confrontation, he felt differently than before: there would be no backing down now. His nascent confidence morphed into resignation. He was ready to elevate the stakes. He could envision the moment he would present this new intelligence, turning the tide from a mere confrontation to a full-scale revelation. But a flicker of fear lingered: the moment he would declare his intentions could lead to repercussions far greater than he anticipated. Regardless of how the CEO reacted, Tom understood that he was entering an arena where the stakes were no longer just his job, but also his integrity and the safety of his daughter. He stared at the polished floor, the reflections dancing under the fluorescent lights, daring him to escalate his challenge. The time had come to face not just the CEO, but the consequences of his courage. Would he seize this moment to bring forth justice and awareness, or would the machine of corporate greed consume him in its relentless gears? He took a deep breath, sensing an unfamiliar thrill, a mixture of dread and resolve. As he stepped into the corridor, his next steps felt monumental. Would the truth either set him free or ensnare him in a tighter grip? The crisp air felt electric against his skin as he signaled the beginning of a new battle, when fate would either crown him a champion or crush his fragile rebellion. Tom's pulse quickened as he approached the conference room, where the board would congregate to discuss the merger. Unease prickled at the back of his neck, an instinctive reminder of the stakes at hand. This was no longer just about him, it was about all the employees who would face the consequences of this soulless maneuver. With each step, he wrestled with the looming specter of doubt. What if he was wrong? What if the weight of his revelations was insufficient to challenge the corporate machine? Inside the conference room, the atmosphere was thick with tension and anticipation. The CEO, masked behind a veneer of calm confidence, occupied the head of the long table. His presence commanded attention, an unyielding fortress fortified by decades of experience navigating corporate complexities. Tom swallowed hard as he took a seat across from him, the stark contrast of their realities starkly evident. "Let us get to the point," the CEO initiated, his tone piercing through the air like a loaded firearm. "I believe you have something you wish to discuss." Tom's heart raced. This was it. The moment he had been preparing for. He aligned his notes, taking a brief moment to collect his thoughts, recalling Lily's innocent smile, her trust in him. It had to mean something beyond his personal ambition. "Yes," Tom began, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm concerned about the merger. I've uncovered several inconsistencies and potential legal implications that could be detrimental to both the employees and the company." The CEO's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition and annoyance flaring. "And what exactly are these inconsistencies, you claim?" Tom could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, yet he forged ahead. He opened his notes and started to outline the deceptive narratives woven into the merger presentation: how employee welfare was glossed over in favor of profit margins, how job losses were minimized in high-level reports. He could see the CEO's countenance shift, subtle defensiveness emerging as he pushed back against Tom's claims. "Do you honestly believe this is your place to question leadership decisions?" The CEO countered, his voice steely. "You're not an executive, how could you possibly understand the big picture?" The world around Tom blurred, adrenaline sharpening his focus. This was a critical juncture, not just in this meeting but in his life. "I understand the ramifications of this decision. I see the faces of the employees who could lose everything. I'm not just questioning, I'm standing up to protect them." There was an audible intake of breath from the assembled executives, their eyebrows arched, shifting in their seats as if they were witnessing an unexpected spectacle. Tom pressed forward, feeling the tide of resolve pulling him deeper. He articulated the legal loopholes. He unearthed the hidden clauses that framed the merger as a savvy financial play for shareholders while sacrificing the very foundation on which the company was built. The room hummed with disbelief, the group captivated by his unwavering assertion. "Your reliance on hearsay will not hold water," the CEO finally rebuffed, but Tom could detect a crack in his confidence. "You are painting a dire picture based on speculation." Tom flexed the power of his preparation, quoting specific articles within the merger agreement, relating them back to tangible examples. The air was charged, each word falling heavily, as he realized he was no longer pleading for acknowledgement, he was demanding it. As the CEO fidgeted with the documents in front of him, the tension crescendoed, and Tom sensed the pivotal moment. Would the CEO choose to dismiss him, to reprimand him for his impertinence, or would the gravity of Tom's findings force a shift? He realized he stood at the crossroads of his professional identity. This confrontation was not just an opening move in a game of corporate chess, it was redefining his existence. Could he really challenge the iron fist of corporate greed and expect to emerge unscathed? "Your employees deserve to know the truth," Tom said, leaning forward, certainty radiating from his posture. "They deserve transparency, not deceit wrapped in corporate jargon." As he met the CEO's guarded gaze, Tom felt the gravity of the moment confirm his journey. He wasn't just fighting for himself, but for every overlooked employee trapped in the web of corporate bureaucracy. Just as he thought he might see cracks widening, the room tingled with sudden hostility as the CEO's mouth parted for a retort. The imminent response promised to unravel everything Tom had built up to this point. Was this confrontation setting him on the path of transformation he'd long yearned for, or unraveling the very fabric of his life? Would the truth guide him to creation, freedom, or destruction? The CEO began to respond, and for a fleeting moment, Tom wondered if this was the genesis of his new reality or the end of the road entirely. "Enough." The CEO's voice sliced through the strained atmosphere with a surprising ferocity, commanding immediate attention. Tom's heart thudded as he caught the flicker of anger in the CEO's eyes. The tension in the conference room felt almost palpable, as if the moment had reached a boiling point. You claim to possess insights that could fundamentally alter our plans. But have you considered the ramifications of your accusations? The CEO leaned slightly forward, hands splayed on the table as he poised himself to unleash his response. This company has survived economic turmoil, market shifts, and setbacks. How dare you suggest that a few discrepancies in paperwork can jeopardize our future? The fear prickling at Tom's senses twisted into a resolute determination. He had stepped into this meeting armed with facts, but it was clear now that firing back with logic would not suffice. He needed to tap into something deeper, his core conviction. I didn't come here to undermine this company, I came here to advocate for its future. The room stirred, murmurs flitted between the executives as Tom observed their shifting expressions. Some seemed intrigued, while others appeared uneasy. This wasn't merely a defense, it was a call to action that transcended the mere mechanics of a corporate evaluation. He pushed the boundaries of his professional persona and dug deep within himself. Our employees are the very backbone of this organization. If we decimate their trust, we lose not only talent but the ethical framework that establishes our reputation. His voice, elevated yet steady, filled the conference room, and Tom felt his confidence solidify. There he was, not simply a junior analyst addressing the board but a bulwark for ethical standards in business. Beneath the pressure of the moment, he found clarity, an unexpected surge of empowerment fueled his message. Yet, the CEO's response was curbed by calculated disdain. So, you want to play the hero? This is a business meeting, not a morality play. How do you suppose we move forward with a merger that you deem unscrupulous without risking shareholder trust? By reconsidering the merger, or at the very least, engaging in transparency. You have an obligation to your employees to explore alternatives that don't blindside them. Tom's brain raced as he navigated the crux of negotiations. Impromptu they may have been, strategies began to unfold before him. He envisioned creating a platform where employee input was not merely rhetoric, but a necessity. The flicker of uncertainty remained in the CEO's eyes, but behind his polished demeanor, Tom felt he had unearthed a seismic shift. What if the style of leadership shifted to embrace inclusivity? The thought electrified him. It opened pathways to negotiations that could demand fairer practices and prevent disgruntlement within the ranks. We could form a task force to assess the long-term impacts of this merger, Tom suggested, sensing the tide beginning to turn. Bringing voices from every level of the company into the fold could provide invaluable perspectives that alleviate risks to our staff rather than simply relegating them to collateral damage in the pursuit of profit. He couldn't quite gauge the reaction around the table, but the flickers of contemplation among his peers bolstered his confidence. The warmth of potential triumph washed over his pragmatism. This wasn't just negotiation, it was a definition of his legacy. But a glimmer of doubt persisted. Would his suggestion be taken seriously? Would the CEO, steeped in a culture of executive privilege, ever truly consider input from the grassroots level? As minutes turned into a heavy silence, Tom fought back the crushing weight of uncertainty. We need to forge a new narrative, he added, attempting to inject enthusiasm into his request, one where we redefine leadership as inclusive, where we align our goals with our people. And then silence fell again, thicker than before. The CEO absorbed Tom's challenge, the carefully constructed walls of his confidence now slightly dented. Perhaps his attempt to project strength had inadvertently revealed vulnerability. Interesting proposition, the CEO allowed slowly, though flattening his tone. But you will need allies to pull this off. Do you think you can persuade others to see your vision? Tom understood the stakes had shifted. He wasn't merely advocating for the truth but for a coalescence of purpose that could transform corporate practices. The opening had been made, but it remained fragile, poised between potential success and the threat of dismissal. He knew this was just the beginning. The moment offered a labyrinth of opportunities, but before him lay a daunting task. Could he cultivate allies from within the very ranks of skepticism that had greeted his initial challenge? Inside, he felt a storm of anticipation brewing, as they all waited for the CEO's final verdict. Would he wield his power to crush this budding initiative, or would he support a shift toward transparency? As the CEO paused to gather his thoughts, Tom felt the weight of possibility and danger merge, stirring a new resolve deep within. The true battle was just beginning, and he would need every ounce of courage and possibly more to navigate this uncharted path. What lay ahead was unclear, but relentlessness would be paramount. "Tom," the CEO finally broke the silence, "we'll need to talk further about this tomorrow. But know this, the clock is ticking." With those words, Tom understood that the stakes were even higher than he had anticipated. Did he have what it took to endure the battles of tomorrow, or would this journey consume him? Each second pulsed with the promise and peril of discoveries yet to come. Tom left the conference room, the weight of the CEO's ultimatum pressing down on him. The atmosphere in the building felt electric, each step echoing with the urgency of the moment. He was no longer just an analyst, he was a reluctant warrior who had thrown a stone into the pond of corporate complacency, waiting to see how the ripples would manifest. As he navigated the corridors, his mind buzzed with the implications of the conversation. The CEO's dismissive tone had cut deep, yet it also ignited a fire within Tom. Were these leaders truly so entrenched in their ways that no amount of evidence or ethical appeal could shift their perspective? The challenge ahead was daunting, but the potential for change felt palpable. He sensed that alliances would be crucial. Returning to his small office, he sat at his desk, the piles of reports and spreadsheets now a backdrop to his brewing strategy. He recalled the faces of his peers, their reactions ranged from skepticism to intrigue. Some were hardened by the corporate grind, while others still held a glimmer of hope. Would they be willing to take a stand? He had to find a way to channel that into a collaborative force. He opened his laptop, fingers poised over the keyboard. His thoughts raced, spinning theories into actionable plans. A task force was the ideal starting point, but it required more than a solitary voice. It needed to resonate from multiple angles, integrating various departments and perspectives. He began drafting a proposal, an invitation to join him in assessing the merger's implications, a way for employees to voice concerns without fear of reprisal. But how did one ensure that the voices of the disenfranchised would be heard in an environment that often dismissed them? The challenge loomed large. A late-night brainstorming session sprung to life as he considered leveraging existing internal communications channels. Perhaps an anonymous feedback platform could foster participation without intimidation, an organic gathering of opinions emerging from the shadows. Tom paused, recognizing the futility of doing this alone. Collaboration was essential. Without allies to build a coalition, his efforts would flounder amidst corporate apathy. He thought of Mia, his colleague from HR. She was known for her compassion and practical insights. If he could engage her enthusiasm, maybe she'd be the voice they needed to reach out across the company. With renewed determination, he sent her a message, outlining the core ideas and asking if they could meet. As he hit send, Tom felt a tremor of hope. And yet, doubts cluttered his mind. Would Mia see the vision? What if she rejected the notion of challenging the status quo? The prospect left him unsettled, but he pushed through. Fear was a companion he recognized all too well, he just needed to transform it into actionable courage. Once again, his concentration shifted. The looming deadline set by the CEO clanged in the back of his mind. They would expect a response quickly, but time could also be a weapon. What strategy would yield the best results? He needed a narrative, something that adapted to support not merely his viewpoints but the collective implications for the workforce. As the hours slipped away, Tom meticulously crafted his presentation for the meeting tomorrow. His palms tingled with both anticipation and anxiety. The more he thought about it, the more he realized it wasn't just about defending his perspective. It was about creating a platform for others to question, to discuss, and to embrace a culture of openness. The time to forge connections was short, and he needed to be ready to face the skepticism head-on. Tomorrow would demand nothing short of courage, not just from him, but from the very people he sought to rally. As the day faded into night and the office lights dimmed, a final thought crossed Tom's mind. He had always been on the fringe, the observer rather than the expected architect. But what if his experiences had been preparing him for this lead role all along? With a deep breath, Tom understood he couldn't afford to be passive. This was a defining moment, and he would not shy away from shaping the narrative. With resolve rekindled, he faced his reflection in the darkened window, understanding that the battle ahead held the potential to reshape not only the company's course but his own path. What if this was the catalyst for all he had ever aspired to be? The thought flickered like a flame, illuminating a new purpose. But as the shadows loomed ahead, he also wondered, were the risks too great for the rewards he sought? Tomorrow's confrontation with the CEO could either ignite his vision or extinguish it entirely. The true test awaited, and the repercussions were still undefined. Tom barely slept that night. Each fleeting hour felt like a lifetime, his mind racing as he imagined every possible reaction to his proposal, each more daunting than the last. He finally surrendered to the day that lay ahead, dragging himself from the cocoon of his bed and gathering the resolve that had been so hard-won in the preceding weeks. As he made his way to the office, the crisp morning air felt unusually invigorating, a contrast to the thick tension that hung in the air inside the building. He could feel the prelude to change, a quivering electric current, though uncertainty trickled through him like cold water. What if this hope was merely a mirage, a product of his overactive imagination? The nagging thought haunted him. Upon reaching his desk, he quickly reviewed his presentation one final time, meticulously rehearsing his delivery. Words, he realized, carried weight, and clarity was crucial. He envisioned himself standing before his colleagues, laying bare the implications of the merger, and inviting their voices into a dialogue that corporate leadership so often denied. Gradually, focus sharpened his resolve, weaving conviction through his doubts. He glanced around the office, noting familiar faces, pensive, some determined, others simply concerned. How many of them shared his frustrations? How many would benefit from a voice they seldom had in the past? Each employee represented a piece of a bigger puzzle, but he needed to invite them into a shared vision. But how to best frame a gathering that felt both organic and empowering? Mia entered the office, her presence magnetic, instantly catalyzing Tom's nervous energy. She scanned the room, before her eyes settled on Tom. He couldn't help but wonder if she sensed the gravity of the upcoming confrontation. He waved her over, his heart pounding like a drum. "Hey, Tom," she said, an encouragement in her eyes. "You ready for today?" "Just about," he replied, forcing a smile even as the anticipation tightened his chest. "Can we talk for a second?" They stepped into a nearby conference room, muffling the ambient sounds of the bustling office. Tom laid out his plan, outlining the structure he envisioned for the meeting, how to frame the discussion, address concerns, and foster an environment where employees felt safe to share their opinions. Mia listened intently, her brow knitted in concentration. "This could really empower people," she finally said, a spark igniting in her voice. "But we have to anticipate some resistance, especially from leadership." Tom nodded, acutely aware that the CEO wouldn't easily abandon his tightly held convictions. "We need to prepare for that. It's crucial we stand firm on the foundation of collective ethos." "But how do we engage the skeptics?" Mia challenged, crossing her arms. "You know how resistant they can be to change." "We'll acknowledge their fears," Tom proposed, while also emphasizing the value of innovation and collaboration. "We can frame the merger not only as an opportunity for growth but as a chance to elevate every employee's role. We need them to imagine an inclusive future." Mia smiled at that, a glimmer of belief breaking through. "You're right. If we can show them what's possible rather than just what's at stake, we might just get through to them." Tom's resolve surged. If he could shape the narrative to inspire rather than threaten, perhaps they could shift the paradigm together, turning skepticism into commitment. But this approach demanded allies. He realized his ability to rally a group would be paramount. As the hour drew nearer, Tom gathered his colleagues. Standing in front of them felt richer than he planned. He felt the weight of expectation, but also a tangible surge of support surging from familiar faces. He began with a story, one of doubt and reluctant courage, inspired by his own journey. Then he unveiled a vision of a collaborative future, interlocking each person's role into a cohesive narrative of chance. As applause filled the room and a sense of solidarity began to swell, Tom dared to hope. Yet in the back of his mind lurked a gnawing uncertainty. Would this truly be enough to sway the CEO? The meeting with leadership loomed on the horizon, a testing ground for the newfound alliance. Tom and everyone who had gathered would soon discover just how deep-rooted complacency went. With a resolve that had solidified in the dynamic exchange, Tom steeled himself for the confrontation ahead. The stage was set, but what if the battle would not be fought only with words, but with the very essence of belief each stood behind? Today, the stakes felt higher than ever. Tomorrow's meeting would either prove the efficacy of their united front or leave them vulnerable to the weight of corporate skepticism. How many would stand firm when confronted with a loss of comfort? A resounding question loomed in his mind, tethering him to the uncertainties. Was he about to ignite a new era, or step into oblivion? Tom entered the conference room with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The well-polished surface of the long table reflected the overhead lights like a spotlight on a stage. His colleagues were already seated, their expressions ranging from cautious optimism to palpable apprehension. This gathering was the culmination of hours of hard work and strategic dialogue, yet it felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, ready to leap but unsure if the ground below would hold. As he took a chair at the head of the table, he caught Mia's eye from across the room. Her nod was a lifeline, grounding him amidst the anxiety swirling inside. He drew a deep breath and reminded himself that he wasn't just an individual advocating for change, he was the voice of those who had felt unheard in their own company. "Thanks for coming everyone," Tom said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Today, we're here to discuss the merger, and I want us all to consider not just the implications for the company, but for each of us as individuals." He glanced at the gathered faces, searching for signs of engagement. Their willingness to listen was crucial, he needed them on this journey. He launched into his presentation, detailing the merger's potential benefits not merely in financial terms, but as a catalyst for personal and professional empowerment. Tom sensed the tentative shifting behind the eyes of his colleagues, those once guarded expressions beginning to soften. He wasn't just discussing numbers and figures, he was breathing life into a vision where everyone could thrive. Yet, his underpinning anxiety gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the premonition that the true test lay ahead, with the CEO looming over the proceedings like a storm cloud. "Let's talk about what this could mean for our day-to-day lives," he continued. "How often do we feel that our roles are fixed, our voices muted? This merger isn't just a shift in brackets and columns on a financial sheet. It is an opportunity to redefine our positions and how we collaborate." As he spoke, he noticed a flicker of acknowledgement in one of the quieter team members, Carla. Her subtle smile released a wave of warmth and confidence within him, pushing him to amplify his arguments. "Imagine a workplace where your ideas shape not only the direction of our projects but the very culture we inhabit. This is about transformation. Together, we can mold a more vibrant, inclusive environment." He presented statistics he had painstakingly gathered, data showing increased employee satisfaction linked to collaborative decision-making. He watched as skepticism seemed to transform among his peers, slowly morphing into contemplation. Yet, as he internalized their shifting energies, another layer of anxiety emerged. Could he really leverage this support against the blunt force of leadership's established hierarchy? Tom had seen firsthand how conservatism in corporate settings stifled innovation. It would take more than declarations of change, it required pulling the rug from underneath long-held comfort and complacency. As the discussion shifted to concerns of pushback from the higher-ups, Tom prepared for what felt like the inevitable confrontation. "I understand fear of the unknown," he said, "but fear can only thrive in silence. Let's voice our concerns openly, not just now but continuously, fostering dialogue instead of passive acceptance." The team began to buzz with tentative enthusiasm. Ideas flared, suggestions rolled in, and Tom could almost feel the wave of collective commitment cresting. They were ready to turn their discussions into action. But the ghost of self-doubt whispered from the abyss, that familiar voice echoing he'd felt ever since the proposal took shape: what if this was just talk? Minutes passed as voices rose in support. Mia spoke up, adding her insights and reinforcing the momentum of their burgeoning coalition. It was invigorating. With each passing minute, Tom felt the walls that had held him back for so long begin to crack, like the old, stagnant corporate culture he sought to dismantle. However, embedded within his elation lay the understanding of the critical meeting with the CEO looming imminently. This was merely a prelude, a warm-up act before the spotlight shifted to the main stage. Would their collective voice reach the decision-makers, or would it drown beneath layers of corporate inertia? The time had come to face the CEO with both trembling hands and a swelling heart. Tom felt the tension escalate, spiraling around the room as each person clung to their role in this shifting paradigm. Tomorrow would be the true litmus test, an encounter that could shatter the ritualistic dance of compliance, or one that could reinforce the status quo with its unforgiving chains. "All right, team," Tom concluded, wiping the beads of sweat from his brow, "let us plan for the meeting tomorrow. Know this: we stand together." As he stepped back from the gathering, a single thought overshadowed the optimism of the moment: had he truly ignited a movement within these walls, or was this simply an echo in an indifferent corridor? Would their fight for transparency and evolution resonate beyond the conference room, or would tomorrow's meeting become yet another lost cause, extinguished by the very forces they sought to challenge? The morning sun broke through the clouds as Tom arrived at the office, an invigorating contrast to the weight of anticipation that loomed over him. Today was pivotal. The meeting with the CEO promised a confrontation, not just of ideas, but of fundamental beliefs. He felt different now, confident yet apprehensive, a fierce resolve fueling each step that carried him toward the conference room. As he settled at the table, colleagues took their seats, glancing with quiet understanding, a collective pulse of uncertainty humming among them. Tom felt a reassuring camaraderie enveloping the room. They were in this together. They had crafted a unified front, transforming from spectators to active participants in a dialogue that could reshape their corporate landscape. The CEO arrived promptly, exuding an air of command that filled the space. As he scanned the room, there was no mistaking the disdain for Tom's presence. His glare bore into Tom, challenging him as if he were a mere nuisance to be swatted away. But the familiar knot of fear had unraveled into something more: sturdy determination. With the meeting underway, Tom took a deep breath and dove into the heart of the discussion. "We're here to discuss the merger," he began, his voice steady and clear. He presented the case his team had built, evidence of how the merger could jeopardize not just jobs, but the institution's ethics, its very character. For each statistic that Tom articulated, he made eye contact with his colleagues, exchanging silent encouragements. The CEO's posture tightened as doubts began to surface in the room. He sensed a shift, one born not from mere dissent, but from authentic concern for the employees and the institution as a whole. Something changed in the atmosphere, nervous glances transformed into resolute nods. Tom pressed on energetically, unveiling the potential for redefining their corporate identity, an opportunity to frame their values around transparency, collaboration, and respect for every worker. "Leadership should always remember its foundation lies with its people," Tom stated, his conviction ringing across the table. "We are not just numbers on a balance sheet, we are the lifeblood of this institution. If we jeopardize that for quick profits, we risk everything this place stands for." The CEO leaned forward, brows knit together with increasing frustration. "Do you understand the implications of what you're proposing?" he retorted, composure wavering. "You're suggesting we halt progress out of fear of the unknown." "No," Tom replied firmly. "What I'm proposing is that we proceed responsibly, together. We must account for every voice, every concern. The merger doesn't need to render us silent, it can be an opportunity for innovation. We have the chance to build a company that thrives on integrity as much as it does on profit." Another executive cleared his throat. "Tom raises valid concerns. Perhaps we should consider creating a task force to review the merger implications thoroughly." Heads began to nod, and Tom felt a surge of hope. His colleagues were rallying, their collective spirit pushing against the rigid wall of the status quo. But the CEO's demeanor shifted, a calm facade barely concealing the tension bubbling beneath. "Do I have your full support on this?" he questioned, targeting Tom with his steely gaze. "Can you ensure this won't turn into a wild goose chase?" "Yes. We're prepared to provide a comprehensive analysis," Tom answered, meeting the challenge head-on. At that moment, he realized this was not only about himself but about each person gathered around the table, their rights, their livelihoods. "Very well," the CEO conceded, albeit begrudgingly. "But understand this: any misstep, any dissent from this point on, will have consequences." The tension in the room skyrocketed, a weight that draped across every shoulder. But amidst the fear, Tom felt a profound stillness within himself, a realization that this was worth standing for. As they concluded the meeting, Tom stepped back, flanked by his peers who now radiated newfound energy. He had stood toe-to-toe with the CEO, his vision shared and validated. This moment was transformative not just for him, but for everyone willing to rise against complacency. Later, as he left the building, the sun shone brilliantly in the sky, illuminating his path forward. No longer just a janitor, Tom felt a renewed sense of identity. He wasn't merely cleaning up someone else's mess, he was creating a narrative for himself and for Lily, a narrative founded on integrity and courage. With concrete achievements laying the groundwork for change, Tom returned home, feeling lighter than he had in years. Upon seeing Lily's bright smile, his heart swelled with satisfaction. He realized his journey was just beginning, a commitment to confronting challenges not in fear, but in the knowledge that his voice mattered. He had become an advocate, brimming with conviction and purpose, achieving the very transformation he had long sought. And through it all, he proved to himself that anyone could rise above their limitations. This was his moment, a turning point where truth triumphed, and hope thrived. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.